නමෝ තස්ස භගවතු අරහතු සම්මා සම්බුද්දස්ස නමෝ තස්ස භගවතු අරහතු සම්මා සම්බුද්දස්ස නමෝ තස්ස භගවතු අරහතු සම්මා සම්බුද්දස්ස. Dear spiritual devotees, welcome everyone for this short Dhamma talk. I first of all extend my blessings to each and every one of you for good health, peace and happiness. Today I would like to share with you some wisdom of the Buddha that can help us to be good parents. I think many of you who are listening to this Dhamma talk may be parents or maybe planning to become parents. So there are important teachings of the Buddha that we can use to become good parents. So I'll be talking about what are the Buddhist parenting skills, what kind of skills that Buddha has emphasized for us to develop as parents. As you know that Buddha has a great admiration for parents, and Buddha has used a very important term to refer to parents. We call it Brahmati Mata Pitaro. The mothers are the Brahmas, which means usually Brahma means one of the formless realm, but actually Buddha has said that the Brahma also means the Brahma Viharas, the sublime, the highest mental virtues that we can develop in our minds. So Buddha called parents Brahma to mean that parents develop four highest or sublime qualities in their minds when they become parents. We know them: metta, which means loving kindness; karuna, compassion; mudita, altruistic joy; and then upekha, equanimity. So becoming a parent is a psychological transformation. And developing this metta, karuna, mudita and upekha towards one's children is a great transformation, and we can call it actually one becomes a form of a little bodhisattvas when someone become a parent, because usually all living beings are self-focused or self-centered, and we always want to the best thing for ourselves, and we want the safety for ourselves. So we live a life of self-focus. But when you become a parent, and that focus is going to be different. So until you are a parent, you will get the best thing for yourself, and you will find the safest place for yourself. But when you become a parent, and then the best thing is not for yourself, and the best thing will be for your child. And the safest place, or maybe the most comfortable place, would not be for you, but you will sacrifice that for your child. So that's a great transformation that can happen in anyone's mind. So usually that transformation happens in a bodhisattva when someone determined to become a supreme Buddha, and he dedicates himself for the well-being of all sentient beings. But in the case of a parent, we find similar but minor transformation, that for the first time we are able to come out from ourselves, come out from our self-centered nature, and then open our heart for another being, or maybe several beings which are our children. So therefore becoming a parent is actually transforming oneself into a bodhisattva. But of course it is limited in the sense that our selfless care is only for our own children. But in the case of a real bodhisattva, that selfless care would be for all sentient beings. But it is very important for us to understand this transformation happens in our mind when we become a parent, to appreciate our own value and also to understand what are the other areas that we can improve and we can grow. So in these four sublime states, loving kindness, compassion, altruistic joy, and equanimity, I think we are most familiar with the first three sublime qualities: loving kindness, compassion, and altruistic joy. We have unconditional love for our children, and we have great compassion, which means we are so sensitive to their suffering and we will do anything to relieve their suffering. And the altruistic joy or mudita means that we appreciate or we rejoice the happiness of our children. But when it comes to equanimity, and that's where sometimes most parents are weak. That means in order for us to become real parents, and we need to have that equanimity, which means the ability to stay balanced in different circumstances. But when it comes to children, and ability to stay equanimous with regard to children's behavior and growth, or the children's response to ourselves, and which is the difficult thing to do. So let's try to find few ways how we can develop this equanimity and how we can grow our parenting skills as a Buddhist following the Buddha's advice. We know that in the Singalova Sutta, which is a very important sutta for our lay life, Buddha has clearly given us 5 duties that we should fulfill as a parent. And so according to the Buddha's advice, first we need to make effort to help our children to refrain from doing unwholesome things, or maybe we call papa nivaranti. And also we should make effort to encourage them to do wholesome things, kalyani nivesanti. And then we should also encourage them to study well, sikkang sippadanti. And then we should also help them, once they are grown ups, we can help them to find good partners or spouses. And we should also share our wealth, our inheritance with them. Those are the basic 5 duties that Buddha has explained. But within these 5 duties, there are some subtle things that we should pay attention to when we raise our children. In order to become good parents, there are some psychological changes that we need to do. One important change we need to do is that when we are raising a child, usually the problems or maybe difficulties or challenges start to occur when our children are growing up. When they are small ones, we have some commitments. It is not that easy, but somehow we can manage that because they will listen to us, and still they will sometimes give us hard times. But most parents start to complain, or start to show their concerns about their children when they are slowly growing up. When they become teenagers or maybe they become young adults. That's where the conflict, maybe some difficulties start to arise. So one important change that we can do as parents when our children are teenagers or young adults is to understand that actually our children are growing up and they are transforming to fully adults, and then change our image of them. Because as parents, we somehow create an image of our children, and that image we maintain as a fixed image for most of the time. So even though our children are growing up every day and they are becoming adult and independent every day, every month, but somehow we maintain a fixed image of our child. And we expect our child to behave in the same way as the child behaved maybe a few years ago. But when they are slowly growing up in their teenage years, we need to really seriously realize that they are changing, they are growing up, and therefore they are not the same child as they used to be. So we have to accept that fact that they are actually gradually growing up. And that understanding can help us a lot to kind of release our fixed image of them and expect them to be different, and expect them to do some things that we may not completely agree with. And then that very acceptance is really useful. And then one other important skills we can develop is actually, as parents, we have a great concern and care for our children, but because of our concern and care, we expect our children to behave in a particular way. We don't want them to do certain things, and we want them to behave in a particular way. So we have certain expectations, and we also set some rules for them. But we know that children do not follow those rules, so they do not behave exactly the way we want them to behave. And then whenever we encounter our children are behaving differently than we expect them to behave, and we develop certain frustrations. And what happens in our communication with our children is that whenever we notice something that we don't notice some behavior of our children that we don't agree with, and we get frustrated and sometimes even angry and unhappy, and then we express our frustration. One important skills that we need to develop is that whenever we notice a behavior or unagreeable behavior, disagreeable behavior of our children, we definitely get frustrated and disappointed, but we should be skillful not to express our frustration, but to express our concern that is beneath that frustration. This needs quite a higher level of mindfulness and maybe more communication skills, but it's very important to learn that. For example, let's say we ask our children not to use a particular device, maybe a handphone, maybe a computer, maybe a tab. We ask them not to use that instrument in a particular hours, maybe. So we teach them, we advise them, and then we expect them to refrain from using those instruments on a particular hour or particular day. But let's assume that one day we notice that they are using it on the time or the day that we ask them not to do so. On that particular time that we ask them to study, but instead of studying or doing some useful thing, they are using this device. So whenever we see it, because we have advised them earlier that not to do it, whenever we notice it, whenever we see it, first we will get frustrated and angry, which is normal, which is very ordinary. And then, because of our frustration and angry, we will quickly shout out. We will quickly express, our frustration. We will, blame them. We will scold them. We will try to punish them, and we will do all these things to prevent, to stop the child doing the behavior that we don't like them to do. So here actually, what is the reason that we get angry or frustrated is actually not that we are angry with our child, because we have a greater concern and care and love for them. So we want them to grow well. We want them to to be good, people. And then, but we need to develop a skill not to express our frustration or anger, but actually instead express our care and concern for them. So in this case, actually, we need to first observe what is happening in us. And let's say we see that our child is using that device that we asked them not to use, and the moment that we notice it, we get frustrated and angry, and there's big changes happening in our body and mind. So first we should develop the skill, first observe the change happens in our body, the change happen in our mind, and take a moment to observe ourselves, and perhaps take a few breaths, and first relax ourselves, and then take a moment to go to our child and then express not the frustration, but the concern, the care and love, and what we expect from them. So this is a skill of communication. So most of the time, we express or we throw our anger, our frustration at our children, and we forget or maybe are unskillful to express our care and concern that is in our heart. But if we are able to express our concern, and maybe if we can go to our child with a calm mind and explain why we ask them not to use it. Our children may not understand at once. We may have to repeat it a few times, and we have to have the patience to say the same thing again and again a few times until they get it. But it's very important to observe our own frustration and anger, and then not to throw that frustration and anger at our children, but to calm ourselves and then approach them and then express our concern and care. That way actually we can be good parents, and our children will understand our message clearly, and they will understand the concern and care that we have for them, and they will not be disturbed, they will not be upset by our anger or frustration. That's a very important parenting skill that we should have. The other important skill I would like to share with you is actually we need to understand that our children are individuals by themselves. We need to realize that actually, although our children came through us, they are not necessarily, we don't really own them. Usually, because children came through us and we have been taking care of them, and so we gradually develop some form of ownership to our children. That's very normal. But in reality, we really cannot own them, and they are not necessarily our extension of ourselves. And so, of course, if we understand it from the Buddhist perspective, and who came to our life as our children are actually the beings, sansaric beings, who are actually moving through this sansara, and they had the enough merits to become human beings, and then they came to this human world through us. So there should be some kind of connection that they came to this world through us. But they are individual beings. They have their own tendencies, they have their own karmas, and they have their own potentials. Therefore, we should develop a different attitude towards our children, rather than looking at our children as our own, like with the sense of an ownership. We should start to look at our children with some respect, and giving them some independence, and treating them as individual beings who came to this world through us. Of course, we have the utmost duty to give the best life to our children as we can. But at the same time, we need to understand that they are individual beings. They are bringing their own karma, and therefore we really cannot fully control their destiny. So that's where the equanimity, the last good sublime quality, come into play. And we can do our part with our love and care, but we need to remember that we cannot fully control their destiny. and because they bring their own karma with them, they bring their own habits and tendencies with them, and definitely we can influence them a lot, particularly in the early childhood. The kind of environment that we are giving them and also the examples that we are exhibiting towards them can shape their future, definitely. So we can kind of guide and navigate them. Maybe we can shape their destiny, but we cannot control their destiny. So we need to accept that and then develop that kind of attitude towards them. So we are responsible for our children. We are responsible for our children's behavior only to a certain extent. We don't have to feel fully responsible for all the destiny or the whole faults or mistakes of our children. We are partly responsible, but we are not fully responsible. So we need to understand that. So that's where the equanimity comes. So we can do our best, but when we realize that there are certain limits that we can do, and then there are certain skills and tendencies and karmic potentials that these children bring with them, so we can only facilitate their potentials, and we can maybe weaken their faults or mistakes or bad habits, but ultimately we have to respect their individuality. So in that case, actually, sometime in training or maybe raising our children, we should give them sometimes we should let them do some mistakes, but of course within the protected environment. We really like to be very protective of our children, but I think sometimes we have to let them do their mistakes and learn from them, and that way they can learn better. And of course we have to make sure that they will not meet with big danger. But I can give you one example from the life of the Buddha himself. We know that Buddha, before becoming the Buddha, was a father, and he as a Prince Siddhartha, he has a child, Rahula. But of course later, at the age of 7, the Rahula became a Samanera, ordained novice monk. And then from the age 7, it is the Buddha who actually raised this young monk. Of course, Venerable Sariputta was his preceptor and Venerable Moggallana was his main teacher, but Buddha also played a very important role in raising this small child. So there's one important incident that when the Venerable Rahula was a young monk, and he was going behind the Buddha in his arms round, and then at the middle of the journey, Buddha gave important advice that one should not be obsessed with one's look, with one's rupa, one's body, and then Venerable Rahula really got that advice seriously, and he really wanted to stop going for the arms round and really wanted to meditate right there. So he stopped following the Buddha in his arms round and went back to meditate. Buddha knew that way of meditating is not going to work, but the Buddha let Venerable Rahula to go and start to do a meditation. And Buddha went his arms round by himself, but then he came back, and in the evening, Venerable Rahula came back to the Buddha saying that his meditation was not successful because he was so hurried, so quick to go and meditate. And then actually Buddha gave very gradual instruction for gradual meditation, almost like Buddha was expecting that Venerable Rahula will come in the evening after he would fail in his meditation. So Buddha let the Venerable Rahula, the young monk, to do his mistake and learn from it and come to the Buddha, and then he was ready to give the full instruction after that. So sometimes, with regard to our children, we may have to do that. Of course, we may have to let them do their mistakes, and maybe they will learn by themselves from their mistakes. But of course, we should guide them. We should guide them at the proper time. and we should make sure that they will not get into troubles. But sometimes we have to give that freedom. So the equanimity is that actually giving some respect to our children and understanding that we cannot fully control their future or destiny, and then give them some freedom to do the mistakes and then learn from them. And those are very important parenting skills that we can have. So in that way, we can guide our children to become really good people, and we should really help them to become good citizens in the world. And as good Buddhist parents, we should remember to become equanimous, not only having metta, karuna, and mudita, but also upekha, sometimes accepting the children as they are, accepting their karmic potentials, and then be okay with that. So that's very important parenting skill. So I hope that you should gradually reflect on these important skills and become good parents. And definitely we have a great love for our children, and we really need to guide them the best possible way. Of course, teaching them the Dhamma is the best thing that we can do to them. But at the same time, remember to develop equanimity towards them, particularly when they are growing old, they are growing to become adults. The more they grow to be adults, the more equanimity we should develop from our part. So then we will let them grow, let them become separate individuals. We will go to the background. We will not disturb or maybe try to control their life, and we will let them to bloom by themselves. So that's the best way to parent a child. So I wish you all the blessings to become good Buddhist parents. Teruvan Saranai.